We are recording. Welcome to the Finance Committee meeting. We've got a lot to talk about, although I think much of the information has already been shared with the board. And as you know, the board had asked Charlene and I to get with the Post-Star and try to get some information out sooner rather than later.
It's a good article.
Just to help everybody understand where we're at, so that they aren't working through snippets of information that they're hearing here and there. So Charlene went and made a PDF of this and put it in the Finance Committee folder for this evening. It must have been her because I know it wasn't me. So thank you, Charlene. So the information in there, Michael did a good job of getting the information last Friday. We were on for about 35 minutes with him last week, going through it all. And I'm not going to scroll down through the whole thing, but he did a nice job getting it out there. And it does absolutely decrease the tax rate based on our projections. As we always say, the final tax rates are based upon what the assessor does in the town of Fort Edward, which affects the village. We only control our levy. So with the levy that we're proposing in this draft, along with the assessed value that we're projecting based on the 22 million going back from the Irving pilot, that is a correct tax rate. It shows us having a reduction of about $2.09 per thousand for folks. So that information is absolutely correct.
I will say, Dan and Charlene, you two did a nice job of explaining things to him, because when Dan was here, it sounded like he knew he was on top of things. So you guys did a nice job.
Yeah.
Very clear.
A couple of did that switch over to the page that says New York State School Boards? Yeah. So Charlene also uploaded, and it's in the folder for tonight, the one house budget summaries that New York State School Boards does. So both the Senate and Assembly one house budgets are in that folder. She and I haven't had a lot. I know I've had very little time to look at that. I think she's had a tiny bit of time, maybe a little bit more than me. So we don't have a lot to say about it yet, other than you'll be able to see in both of them. They're asking for more funding for schools than the governor has already put out there. But if you have some questions about those, we can talk about them briefly, but probably we'll be talking about that next time after there's been a little bit more negotiation on those things. But they're both in there. I'll just pop up the Assembly while we're right here. So they're both in there, and those two. Are you still seeing my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
So those two I did not put inside the folder for tonight's meeting. I left them out in the folder for next year's budget development, just so they're kind of on. They're not buried in that folder. Just easier for people to find when you get there. And did that change over to the one with the yellow at the top? The yellow highlighting. Okay.
Yep.
Excellent. So this is the forecast, the most recent forecast that Charlene's put out there. In your folder, it's a PDF, and there's multiple documents. So I put them in there that way. They're the same documents that Charlene and I discussed. Again, with the Post-Star, we did not release the documents because the board had not had them yet, but we did speak to them. And I have separate sheets for revenues and expenses. And again, Charlene uploaded those. And the tax rate calculator you guys have seen before, but it lays out the money, the money and how we calculate that tax rate. And you can see the 27.188, which I rounded up to $27.19 when I spoke with the Post-Star. But you always have to have that tax rate going out to 6. Is it 5 or 6? It's listed with 6, but I know you have to go out to 5 or 6 digits when you do that. So I'm guessing the number is 6. But when we speak about it, we round it off a little bit. And down at the bottom of that, you can see that our tax levy is increasing by 12.78% at $384,366. And that is, we spoke about it several times. A little over 10% of that is the Irving pilot, and the remainder of that is the carryover from last year because our budget failed and we had to go to contingent, so we weren't able to get the money that was within the cap last year. And you can see that our budget overall still is showing a decrease of about $187,000 less. Again, there is a draft. There's still a couple of numbers that Charlene is working on, and I alluded to it when I spoke with the post-R, and I'll say it again tonight. I've kind of got a little script I'll go down through, and then we can look at the documents in more detail if you folks have questions or just the need and want to do so. So I'm going to stop sharing just for a minute, and because those are little things there. But so the draft budget, where we're projecting our tax rate to go down by about $2.09, does restore pre-K if we have enough signups to make that program a viable option for our children. It restores a second section of kindergarten, a second section of fourth grade, a second section of fifth grade. It also restores a 0.67 ELA teacher in grades 7 through 12, a 0.67 social studies teacher in grades 7 through 12, a 0.67 science teacher in grades 7 through 12, a 0.8 math teacher, a 0.67 music, and a 0.67 health. It also provides for us to be able to hire some more support staff to directly support students who are looking to bring back from out-of-district placements, as well as some students who are enrolling new to our district next year that are going to need support staff based on the recommendations in their IEPs. Certainly, we're not done with any reviews yet, but we've projected in the numbers based on Charlene and I had a conversation with Mr. Galarno, as well as the counseling team that's working as the CSE chairs this year to really do a good job projecting that. And we had a lot of good feedback on different things. So we feel good about those numbers, but we know that they're not final till those interviews are over. And then they're still not final really until you know who's here next year, which could mean an increase or a decrease in what we need for support staff and costs of programs for our students.
Dan, is it budgeted at 6 or is it not budgeted that way?
It's budgeted at 6.
Budgeted at 6, okay.
Yeah, budgeted at 6 support staff. And again, those are all attached directly to students or classrooms. Like when you have the 12-1-1, it's the one that we need to have the classroom.
Right. So as far as that list goes that you read and that we have here, how does it match up to the list when we talked about adding stuff back? It's pretty much in line with all that. It
is. It's all of that and then some, because after the same day that we talked with the special ed folks, we also spent another half hour or so with Joanna Scotch and Mr. Galarno. So Mrs. Scotch and Mr. Galarno talking about the 7 through 12 classrooms and what supports we would need to bring all the students back and have them here in person next year and not have classrooms that were approaching 30 or above 30 students per class. So it's not everything that we would like to have back, and it won't mean that we can go back to the schedule that we had, but it certainly provides for a lot more flexibility and a lot more opportunities.
Dan, could you just go through what is not being restored?
Yep. So transportation is not being restored. And also each of those positions that I said as part-time FTEs, those were all full-time people prior to the reductions. So in ELA, social studies, science, math, music, and health, there's a 0.33 that's not being restored in each one of those. There's no restoration in the administrative area. There's no restoration in building.
Ellen, you might need to mute your phone for a second. Thank you.
Yep. So that would be what's not restored. So I can say it again. So it's partial. We did partial restorations of those positions. They all used to be full time in the middle high school. So those would be partials. Then there's no restoration to the administrative portion, and there's no restoration to any positions in buildings, grounds, and transportation. And we had several of those that we reduced by retirement or by people resigning. And the same in the business office, there's no restoration there. And as far as the board clerk and secretary, there was no restoration there. Those were folks that we asked to retire, and they did so. We do know that they're working part-time for us now, to be fully transparent, but where they were working 5 days a week in previous years are now working like a day and a half to 2 days a week. So it's a market change.
Sure.
So total budget.
Let me just ask Ella if she has anything else, because it was just noisy in the background. Ella, did you have anything else?
Nope, that was good. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then we had I almost forgot, we had the one special education teacher that used to be a 1.0. That person retired, and we replaced them with a 0.5 this year. So this does not bring that position back to 1.0 again. It keeps it at 0.5.
Yeah. And like you said in the beginning of this too, a large part of that, the money that we're getting, has to do with the pilot. But it also helped making those decisions with the healthcare, right? That kind of helped give us a little bit more money for this year. Realize some savings in that through negotiation with FETA and support staff. So that's kind of helped us bring some of those things back, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Refinancing did a big job of it too.
Yep.
Those are the two big ones: the refinancing of the debt and the health insurance. So I was glad that that those folks were recognized in the article that went out publicly as well. So it was a lot of work and by a lot of people to make that happen, and I want to make sure that we recognize that. So thanks, Charlene, and thanks to everybody who had part in the health insurance negotiations too. And I know there's some people who have jumped on the meeting. Going down through the pilot agreement, that's probably the trickiest thing for a lot of folks to understand. I think everybody in Fort Edward is starting to have a pretty good grasp of it. So in a normal tax cap year, you add in 1 year's pilot and you subtract the other. So usually it's pretty even, right? And this is a year where we add in last year's pilot, but we don't subtract the new year, which means that pilot money is added on to our levy. So at a regular 50% passage of the budget, we do have a levy increase of over 12%. But we've talked about where that comes from, and that'll be an important talking point for folks when our budget is compared against other school districts. And I stress that when Charlene and I spoke with the Post-Star, we stress that we really need them to make sure that anytime they're doing a comparison for people, that they call out somehow the reason why that number looks like that, because there's a very legitimate reason that we don't have control over. We didn't write the pilot. We're not the entity that does so. We are just one of the people named in the pilot that it affects as far as tax rates go. Do they talk to schools about pilots? Yes, they do in the end. Do we get to make the decision? No, we do not get to make that decision. So that's the information. Just curious, what documents, Charlene, do you want to go through any of the documents specifically, or was there one you wanted to talk about, or do you want the board to fire away some questions, or what do you think? Hearing none, I'm going to pop the budget up there, and I'll let Charlene give.
Yeah, I also like to see what we're reporting up, right? So that's the tax. I think you showed it to us earlier, but what we're reporting up as far as what we're going at.
Okay. So I'll start with the budget.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's in your folder. You can see 18, 19, 19, 20, 2021, and the new budget. So we've got the 4 years in there for you to take a look at. Charlene, anything you want to note to folks?
No, in particular. I mean, I'm giving them the line by line, but I mean, it's probably more detail than they really need to have. In here, you're going to see the GEAR and the ESSER, which is the CARES Act, which is federal funding. And in the governor's budget, that's all going away. But again, he proposed cutting our STAR and then giving us federal funding. And the federal funding in the budget for next year is actually over $564,000, and all of that money will have to be applied for as a grant, as federal funding. So hopefully that will change. That's why I wanted to get the one house bills out to you, because hopefully that whole scenario will change. And definitely both houses are rejecting his executive proposal, in particular the consolidation of the expense-based aids and the creation of that local district funding adjustment, which is the taking back of our STAR. And also they're both rejecting the elimination of prior year adjustments. So a lot of schools are owed money for prior years, and he's proposing doing away with that completely, and both houses are rejecting that. They're also proposing significantly increasing the state aid levels. So I have some hope. We'll see what happens in the next 15 days. But definitely with the passing of the federal stimulus act, there is 4 times the funding for schools above what he built this budget on. So hopefully some of these things will go away, like applying for that federal grant money and stuff. And hopefully it's still available so that we can use it for helping our students, catch up for the last 15 months, being virtual and with COVID. It's been a hard time for the kids. And so hopefully we can take some of that federal money and do some extra things with it instead of covering our operations with. So
that's a good point. So the draft budget that you're looking at takes into account just the governor's runs, right? Just the governor's runs. So we are certainly, Charlene said it, we are hopeful that there will be more funding that comes to every school, and especially Fort Edward. But this is based on the governor's runs where we're at right now. And so one of the things that we've talked about is that when you look at the spending side of our budget, if we get more aid, or if we get federal grants, or however they word this, if we have to apply for them, if it just flows through to us, we may want to talk about spending more. But it's important to let people know that we're not talking about taxing more, right? Those are 2 big distinctions in this budget. Like if tomorrow, or on April 1st, if the final budget shows that we've had $500,000 more dollars coming to Fort Edward, a couple of things we need to be careful of. If it's a 1-year infusion, you don't want to build a program on it, right? Because when it's gone the next year, you've got no way to fund it. And that's why we talked about recovery education, because hopefully that would be a 1-year thing where we're trying to get our kids caught up, provide some programming, and other 1-year things. So just be careful when we're speaking about it. We just want to keep that in the back of our mind. But building this budget the way that it is right now, with the pilot coming off, I want to fully acknowledge that. We're trying to build a path forward, right? And that's what we keep saying. We know we're in the middle of an annexation study, but we're still building a path forward and planning things out over multiple years. And so it's a conservative budget. It builds upon, it brings a lot of things back that we can build upon. Let me say it that way. Doesn't bring it all back. It doesn't create the yo-yo effect. We're looking to bring things back at an even line, hopefully, and get to a point where we can be sustainable, which isn't something we've been able to stay over the last 5 years with all the turmoil that we've been through financially. So I wanted to put that out there for everybody.
Yeah, just a couple of these line items was zeroed out for the coming year. Were they? I don't want to get in, drill down here, but BOCES administration.
they may just be on a different line item, a different budget code now. So
Is that what it is? Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
we've cleaned up a lot of budget codes. So this was I think this was your first year with Envision. And it's also, I like things to be in the ST3 code. So if they're not, which is the state reporting code, And we use that for export from the software for our transparency report for New York State and our ESSA report for the federal government. So if things are on the wrong line or in the wrong budget code, it's just a lot of extra work when you do the export fixing all that. So I've been doing some fixing. So we're just making it a little more concise. So you may find things on a different line item. And then again, you know, the gear and the ESSER, excuse me, those are brand new codes this year, and we have to track those expenditures because it's federal aid, and we had to apply for those CARE Acts grants, and there was 2 of them. So there was ESSER and gear. And so we have to track that because we have to report any federal aid. We have to do the final cost reports for those grants. And if you're audited, you know, you want to make sure those are on a separate line item so that you have a tracking mechanism and you can print reports. And again, it's federal money. So it's been a lot more complicated this year. It's been a lot harder for grant applications, and also harder for Michelle, the payroll clerk, to read code and build all these brand new budget codes to track all of this grant funding this year. So this year, I think we only had, I think it was 168,000. Don't quote me. I'd have to look back. No, 189. 189,000 was our CARES Act funding. This budget right here now that we're looking at is built on $564,000 of federal funding. So that is my only concern, I think, about this budget. So I'm hoping that the final budget is not so reliant on the federal aid. So we did get an email out today also, you know, from Questar, State Aid Planning, our financial advisor. They help us with state aid planning, saying that, you know, if you don't have your CARES Act budget in and approved, you better get it done the next couple of days, because all this federal money has to go back to the federal government if it's not been approved and allocated by a certain date. I think they have 12 months, and they receive the money May 4th or something. So if people don't have their budgets in and submitted, and they're not in review by the end of this month, then they're at risk of losing all that federal aid. So it just puts a lot more work on the school district and a lot more tracking and on payroll. And that's probably my only concern about this budget, is that, you know, we're talking about $564,000 of federal aid, and it's a one-time aid. So once the state, you know, cuts your STAR funding, you know, once they cut something, sometimes it's doesn't necessarily come back. So, you know, the last 2 years have been really different. And anybody who was around during the gap elimination, I think it took 12 years for all that aid to come back to the school districts. I think I read yesterday. So, you know, thank God for the stimulus bill and the amount of money that New York State received for its school districts, and hopefully that makes it into the final budget. So, and that's why this is a draft.
Right. Well, yeah, get you, because I'm looking at some big ticket items, obviously salaries and things like that, and the difference between the trend and things like that. So those numbers aren't necessarily final.
Oh, all these numbers are final as far as salaries, and as you know, we've set forth. Yeah. Okay. I mean, I'm just saying that you know, there's more to come, and we might want to make some adjustments.
Gotcha. Yeah, you can see where things came back in. Okay.
So this one that's up now is the revenue.
Oh, I'm still looking at the budget. I'm sorry. Okay.
And that's we can go back and forth, whatever works.
Yeah, I would say look it over, and if you have any questions, and you know, pop Dan an email, and then we can respond directly to any particular line item questions, because you know, there could be a number of reasons for a particular line to be up or down.
Well, as you know, when you're looking at a budget from this chair, you're looking at variances, right? You're just trying to see where the variance is from year to year, and then wonder where that variance is. If things are moving line to line, then that's the explanation.
Right.
So yeah, got it. Cool.
I think if you look at the forecast, that kind of gives you a better idea, because we've really focused on the major categories, and it's easier to see the trends because all the salaries are together and all the health insurance lines are together. And,
Gotcha.
you know, all the fuel is together. And so other than looking at, is this coming out of a federal grant in the general fund? Because that's kind of odd that you have all these federal grant lines in your general fund. And they did it during gap elimination, but usually your state and federal grant money is in the F fund and it's not part of your general fund budget. So having all those extra lines in there really makes the budget confusing. So.
Yeah.
Dan, that 16% drop in the BOCES services, is that due to bringing kids back to school? Or I mean, that's a pretty good chunk, 16% coming back from BOCES. I'm just wondering why.
Which document are you on, James?
I'm on just the budget forecast. I'm just looking at forecast number 2.
Got it.
We had some students move out of district. We had some students age out. So we did have a drop. And then if you remember, Dan worked very diligently in July, I think it was, even July and August, even with BOCES to trim some of the services that they were providing us so that we could find some more savings there. And he did a very good job at that. And so, you know, it significantly dropped that budget. I can't think of, other than maybe a couple of things that we might have added this year, added back in that we needed because of, I think, mostly related to COVID and testing and different things. I don't think we've added back in any new services for next
Right.
year.
So basically the 16% drop is accumulation of this, that, and the other thing put together. So in total, it comes up to that.
Correct.
Which is a good job to cut that. That's one thing we never cut, that BOCES budget. That's a good cut. Again, 26% saving on the debt service. That was a huge move.
Of course,
Yep.
keeping in mind, we did extend the term, but we did.
Oh yeah, yeah, I know, but we're seeing this here.
rate and made it a little more affordable. So.
Yeah, we had
Restructuring the contract.
especially having to take on all the extra debt we had to take on last year to pay Washington County back. We had to refinance everything.
Right.
To make it sustainable.
Right. But we got some good rates, so it made sense, and you know, it made it more affordable. So.
Yeah, we'll benefit for a while from those. So that was good.
Hey, that fuels line, that is like, you know, gas and electric for the building, or does that include, you know, the vehicle fuels and all that?
No, that's the electricity and gas. That's through the NY SMEC, and so they do a. It's kind of like a consortium. So they go out to bid. I think we just went out. I think they go out every 3 years, and they just went out. So this was all fresh in my mind a couple of weeks ago, so it's new for me. But I talked to the gentleman there, and Dan, is that the gentleman that passed away?
Yeah, so I was going to say, so there's a guy who's in charge of that bidding that occurs, and is usually our contact who passed away just in the last week in an automobile accident. So thoughts and prayers to him and his family. But so that's for the building, Tom. We buy all of our gasoline and diesel fuel for anything transportation, buildings and grounds. We buy that through Hudson Falls School District. We don't maintain any tanks here. So they bill us on as used. They track. They have keys for their gas pumps. We have a key. Our driver takes the key up. They fill up the bus, and then they provide a bill back to us, a fuel sheet, and a bill back to us to pay them. So, short answer: that line is just for the plant here.
So I was a little surprised by the increase, and again, everything goes up.
They do a budget for us. He sent me over all the documentations, and they analyze it. They bill us bi-weekly. They bill us 6 payments, and the gentleman was just so nice, and so I apologize, but it just was a little upsetting because I had just met him and spoke to him, and then to receive that email was difficult, but yeah, he was wonderful explaining everything to me, and I have all the backup information, and I feel very comfortable with that number. We know prices are on the uptick right now. So we'll see where they go, but I wanted to be sure. Anything we don't spend, they do the reconciliation at the end of their fiscal year and they return it to us. And we oftentimes do get a small refund, but they always want to make sure that they don't bill us at the end of the year. So they want to make sure that we've paid in enough. So I feel very comfortable with their numbers.
No, and that's fine. I mean, when you look at gas and electric, the prices, $17,000 for a building that size in a year, I can see it as being, not something that stands out too much. The only thing that it caught my eye about was we had a lot of, a lot of inefficiencies done through the construction project with all those auto lights and all that different stuff.
Right.
So maybe it's not going up 30,000 because of that. I don't know.
And we may see it be less, but based on the information that they had in our prior usage, I think he said they use a 3-year look back. So we may see some savings there. And the 145, I think, was pretty much a rollover of the prior year. So we, I didn't look at this year to see. We can look at the one-liner and see if we're saving right now. But I can do a 12-month analysis when we get to the end and see how we did on that 145. So
yeah. Okay, it could have been. Maybe it would have been worse if we didn't have those efficiencies. Who knows? So. Yeah. So just one more question on this. So the fuel, I imagine it's not a big significant thing to talk about as far as the buses, but where does that stuff appear? Is it under materials and supplies? Like where?
It should be materials and supplies. So I'll take a look at that and see. Again, this year was an unusual year because we didn't do transportation, and so I'll have to look back at the prior year to see what our fuel costs were. But at this point, if we're not bringing back transportation, it's pretty much a moot point. I'll see what we spent this year and factor it out for a full school year.
Gotcha. Cool.
Charlene, can I ask a question about the fluidity of that fund balance appropriation? I know the last time we met in February, the end of February, we were looking at like 84,000. Now it's 104,000. Is there a possibility that's going to be more, or are we going to work off that 104,000? That's a static number now.
I'm trying to get a good handle on that fund balance. Part of the challenge of that is making sure that all of my accounts payable and my accounts receivables are in there. So I've been trying to track down anything or any vendor that we might owe that we have not encumbered yet. Talking to Dan, talking to Michelle, talking to the shared business office. And then also tracking down perhaps any accounts receivables that we might have that we haven't booked yet as revenue. And so I think we might be a month behind in our warrant. As you know, we didn't do a warrant this month for reasons. And so I just need to make sure that we have all our accounts payable and our accounts receivables accounted for. So that fund balance is something we work on daily. Dan can tell you, he probably got 3 emails today saying, I'm trying to, give the board a good fund balance number. I need to know this, I need to know that. And so we're working on it and I will keep updating you on it.
All right. Just so if there is a change, there'll probably be a subtle nuance, but we're not going to see anything that'll like 20 grand over a few weeks. That's pretty good, or 20,000 is pretty good, but so we probably won't see that again. I guess that's what I'm getting at. So 104 is probably going to be static for us. Or in the ballpark.
So you're talking about the fund balance that I have in there for the budget appropriation?
Yep.
Basically, that's enough to balance the budget. If we were to receive more funding from the state, then we could reduce our use of fund balance.
Okay, so that would shift back. Okay, gotcha.
All right. Thank you. Sorry, I didn't quite understand. But
no, that's okay.
That information was important anyway, so. Yeah, we have to have a balanced budget. So we are using some money from our debt reserve. We'll be cleaning that up. And BPD and Questar both weighed in on that. And the accountants are looking at it as well. So far, we have 2 out of the 3 saying yes, and I feel comfortable with it. So we'll be using that debt service money in our tax cap calculation and in our and as a transfer. We'll be cleaning that up and using that towards our budget. So.
Well, I appreciate the information. I appreciate the form that's set out in. It's easy to follow, so easy to understand. answers a lot of questions you'd have. So I appreciate that, Charlene.
Tom, did you have a question about this one?
Not a question. I just wanted to see it up there one more time.
Is it big enough?
Yes, thank you. Yeah. I think that, and that with that article that came out and all the information that's going out there, I think it's a lot of info. When's our presentation?
So we have to we don't do anything until we have a finalized New York State budget, and after that, you folks have to adopt the budget. You're talking about
when's the presentation to the public? Yeah, it's like
the hearing date.
That date, I think.
Yeah. So do I have it on? I don't have it right on the tip of my
The
tongue.
annual budget hearing is Monday, May 10th.
Yeah, 6 p.m. I can see it across the room here.
The board should be able to adopt this at budget session number 5 on Monday, April 19th, I would think, right, Dan?
Yeah.
That was my hope that we would, because that's the same night as our regular board meeting. So I was hoping that we would adopt the budget that evening, unless there's something that that happens that's totally unexpected in the world that would change, a lot of it. But I would say, I feel comfortable saying this is like 90 to 95% where it needs to be, other than we need a final state budget. And if things look a little bit better, you'll see where the money is coming from, maybe change a little bit. But as far as taxing, the information, I'll say it again, the information that was released and the information that you're seeing on your screen right now, that is where we are at and should be at. And that levy is still about $230,000 less than the levy was for the 16-17 school year. And I get that isn't something that a lot of people do care about that, but when people are voting, they're voting based on what their tax bill is. And we understand that completely, but it is at least a talking point that's still less money than this community was asking for back in 16-17 and several of the years prior to 16-17, based on the chart that we posted on our website last year. And I don't remember exactly how many years, but many years.
So your point is that the school is running lean, and it's costing less as far as to operate, but it's in line. Right?
And that number is, like I said, this is something I'm going to keep stressing. That levy number is something that, based on the projections that Charlene's put together, that number gets us to sustainability, a step in the right direction towards sustainability. Right. Let me say it that way. Numbers lower than that do not allow us to sustain. Again, it allowed us to put some programs back that we need if we're going to provide what the students here deserve. So yeah. That's kind of what we had. I think, Charlene, anything. Oh, I guess I want to say it. I say it at every meeting. That just want to put out there for anybody. I know there's a few people watching, but just in case people watch the recordings later on, that the budget and the budget vote with that levy and the reduced tax rate for the 21-22 school year is completely separate than anything that people think or feel about the annexation vote or annexation study. So I'm going to keep saying that. If you're pro-annexation, it does not mean you need to be anti-school budget. Our students are going to be here, and we're planning for them to be here for as long as we can have them here sustainably with all of our projections. But they're absolutely going to be here next year. And we know that this year our kids took a big hit. And frankly, because of COVID, it didn't seem as big as it really was, because a lot of other schools took similar hits only because they weren't allowed by law to have kids in programs. But if those programs had been able to happen, we would not have been able to fund them here. We would have had a lot of classrooms with 30-something kids in them. So I just want to put that out there. Annexation and your feelings about annexation, although they're both being talked about at the same time, are separate and distinct from the budget we're asking people to vote on. So I'll keep saying that. Hopefully I'm making a good point that people can understand as they're listening or if they come back and watch these videos.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's a real important point. And we got to pound that home.
So any questions for Charlene or for me?
No, I'll echo James' sentiment. I mean, the preparation, the reports, everything's been great. This has been, compared to previous budget seasons, this has been a very efficient one, I think, and it's been a good one. So thank you.
And so I see that Mr. Herman's on the line, but we will start working on our budget newsletter too. Although the budget is not final,
Right.
we'll start working on that, and he's a big piece of that puzzle. He's the designer. So we've had a few conversations. He's been coming to see me saying, "Hey, let's get this started," so we're not on the phone till 10 o'clock in the evening, the night before we want to have it done. So we're trying to work through it. Charlene, if you have any samples of ones you've used previously that you think do a better job than the one you saw come out of Fort Edward last year, we'd be happy to look at them. If there's little things you think need to be changed, if you can let Ryan or I know, you let me know, I'll let Ryan know. Otherwise, we'd be looking at a similar template to last year. But we want to do whatever works best to get the information out to our community. I'm in a form that they can use to make an informed decision on how they'll vote for the school budget. That's all I have for tonight.
Sounds good. I appreciate it. Anybody else?
No, thanks everybody.
Excellent. We'll stop recording now, and thanks for everybody for coming tonight. And now we'll get the recording posted as soon as we can.
Perfect.